After wide receivers 1 through 3, the rest of the spots in the top 10 are up for grabs. Who are the new faces in new places for our top 10 wide receiver rankings? We're going to discuss this and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everyday. As you know, I got to kick the intro to Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at TheTalentCode. You talk to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champ, man, and the other side to this dynamic duo that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to start this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. Every listen is greatly appreciated over here. DP, Monday, we had the QB rankings. Tuesday, the playmaker rankings. We're going with the wide receivers, right? Ranking the top 10 wide receivers in the 2025 NFL draft class. Then we're going to talk about what are our biggest draft takeaways and demand. We had a significant injury on Saturday. Breaking news. Mr. Harold Perkins tore his ACL and will be out for the season. We're going to have a very interesting conversation surrounding that. DP. Let's get into these wide receiver rankings.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Keith, it's been a minute since we've done our top wide receivers. Just things started off slow for these pass catchers. So we wanted a lot of things to catch up to itself, Keith. So at number 1, we're keeping Tatora McMillan out of Arizona. Number 2, Travis Hunter out of Colorado. 2A, 2B. In terms of Luther Burton, the third out of Missouri, he's come on the last 2 weeks, with Missouri. Number 4, Trey Harris from Ole Miss. At number 5, Antoine Wells, Juice Wells Jr. From Ole Miss as well. Number 6, Tay Felton from Maryland. Number 7, Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. Number 8, Isaiah Bond from Texas. Number 9, a new face, Keith, that I got to get your thoughts on from his time at LSU, Jack Bech. And at number 10, Deion Burks. Keith, that we consistently say the top 3 is solidified. But that 4, 5, 6 spot, even 7 really, is wide open. Trey Harris has been – the competition hasn't been great, but he's been balling for Ole Miss. Him and Juice Wells. And I like the fact that Lane's been dialing both of those guys' numbers. Like, it's not just one or the other. He's finding the way to get both of his playmakers the football in different ways, right? And knowing that they're two different skill sets and body types and everything like that. So their games complement one another and they mesh well. Now he's got to see what happens when now that we're getting into SEC play soon. I think they should be playing some more robust competition rather than what they've been playing the first 4 darn weeks of the college football season. But yeah, I mean, looking at Trey Harris and Juice Wells, I like what they have done and the production they've put up, and they produce well. You know, especially Trey. I think he's coming off a game with over 200 yards receiving. And granted, it was Georgia Southern, so it's like, are you going to be able to do that against Georgia or Bama or one of these other?
We're about to find out, DP. We're going to learn today.
We're going to learn today. So it's like, that's going to be something that's I'm really paying attention to. I do think I still hold out that I think Juice Wells could leapfrog him in the pecking order once we get in the SEC play. And Jackson Dart is really getting, I guess you could say the chemistry down, right? To trust him in those big moments. Because let's say teams do want to take away Trey Harris. Juice Wells gets one-on-one. That's the guy I'm going to. I'm going to that single matchup.
Nah, DP, I think you outlined it right. And we kind of talked about it on yesterday's show, right? This has been a very slow road to the beginning of the season. So still trying to figure everything out. And I'm with you. And it's crazy to have both of the Ole Miss wide receivers right back to back that high. But it's at this point it's much warranted, right? Ole Miss is rolling through everybody, and both of those guys are producing at a high level. Do I expect that sometime Juice Wells, his athletic ability to showcase, right, once they get into like heavy SEC play. Yeah, and then people probably lean more towards that situation. But talking about the back end, because you asked about if you could pull a list up again, Jack Best, right? I think he was sitting at number 9, I believe. And this is a guy, DP, that's playing really good football. In the game against TCU, UCF, the UCF game, he played really well, right? I think he ran a post corner, right? Freed himself up in the middle of the field. No, it was a corner, or was it a corner post? I believe freed himself up in the middle of the field, and you're able to see the athleticism. But then he also worked that short to intermediate areas too. So you're seeing a guy that can work all 3 levels. The conversation, DP, we talked about him on here, but Ty Felton, I like Ty Felton in this list being right around Emeka Egbuka because I think they're may be very similar, right? And we're talking about a name that's coming out of nowhere, but they may be very similar in what they provide as far as providing those big explosive plays, kind of striders, right? Once they get into the open field, and can serve as a really good role. So that combination is going to be fun too.
Yeah, and with Felton, man, like they played Villanova this past week, Keith, and this is the trust when you have a star wide receiver, quarterback throws it into double coverage, looked like a cover 2 hole shot, but it was a much tighter covered honey hole. Like it wasn't a wide open hole, and he just threw it up, helmet higher, and Ty went up and just high
got it.
You know what I mean? Body control. He came down in bounds. Like he might have got a little bit after the catch as well. But the speed vertically, the ball tracking, the strength and the play strength and the body, the ability to move in those tightly confined spaces, but also to make those plays at the catch point, be able to bounce off of tackles and fight through tackles. Like I'm just sitting here like, and he's one of the, I think he's ranked 3rd, maybe 2nd or 3rd right now, I think, in receiving yards in the country.
Yeah, I think he might be 3rd right now, I believe.
Yeah. You're right. You're right. He is 3rd.
He was 1st, I think, through the first 3 weeks, I believe, right? So it might have just been this past week to where he got leapfrogged, just by a couple big time performances, but definitely a guy that's performing well. DP, Texas wide receiver, Isaiah Bond. I know you like him a lot, right? And we talked about him. What are you seeing from him early on? I guess just to warrant, him being up there as far as being a top 10 wide receiver.
Man, I'm seeing, of course, the natural playmaking, the speed, right? I think they clocked him at 22, over 22 miles per hour. I think it was this past Saturday or the Saturday before. And I was like, yeah, he might be trying to come for that Xavier Worthy, 40 time record.
Yeah, yep.
Happily, you hitting 22 plus. But the easy gas, of course, in Sark's offense, I feel like he's actually able to play wide receiver a little more than he was able to play in that Tommy Reese or whoever it was offense at Bama. So for me, it's like I'm seeing him release package, I'm seeing route running, but also I still see Sark use him as, let's just get him the football, quick screens, bubble stuff, and allow him to work on the perimeter. So I think as they get into SEC play, right, they have a lot of weapons. Ryan Wingo's like a 6'2" explosive freshman. We didn't even get a chance to talk about him last week on the freshman phenom.
Yeah.
Different as well. But they got a lot of weapons at Texas. And now once Quinn Ewers comes back, because I know people want to see as much of Arch as possible, I want Quinn in those SEC matchups because it's a different ball game going against ULM and stuff like that. Now you got to face Bama or somewhat Georgia. And yeah, you haven't played that much. When Quentin comes back, I think this passing offense is going to get their point guard back, their distributor back. And I think we could see the best of Isaiah Bond going forward because at the end of the day, you're going to need to make those big plays in SEC play, in that SEC competition. We talked about it with Trey Harris and Juice Wells. Get their first SEC game. They got Kentucky this Saturday. They got Kentucky this Saturday, right? I think it was Maxwell Hairston,
the corner. Yep.
Like he can play. Like he's got athleticism. He can, be physical in coverage, things like that. That's going to be their first real test for those guys. I think with Isaiah Bond, I just see a guy that you can, and he's playing a lot outside. Which when I looked at the snap share compared to him and like Emeka is almost predominantly in the slot still, and I was hoping he'd play more outside. While I look at Isaiah Bond, I was like, Bond's outside a whole lot more than I expected him to be in this offense, which is fine. I'm perfectly fine with it because you're allowing him to kind of naturally grow at the receiver position, and I'm seeing the steps and strides he's making.
Yeah, and they did the same thing with Xavier Worthy, right? Lined him up
Yeah.
outside a great deal to say that he probably had a slot body, right? Like if that's how
Yeah.
you want to put it. But DP, let's keep this thing going and flowing. And coming up next, man, we're gonna have our biggest draft takeaways, right? We're a quarter through the college football season. What are our biggest takeaways? What are we seeing out there? And we're gonna have that conversation coming up next.
When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn also knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That is linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Biggest draft takeaways coming off of week 4 of college football. Keith, I think for me, I've been sticking with this position group. The tight end group, man, it's loaded. Like, it's absolutely loaded. Keith, I don't know how many teams in the NFL right now currently need tight ends. I don't care if you actually need a tight end, draft a tight end. Like, that's just how I feel about it. Even if you don't need one, if you got you a top guy, get another one, get a second one. Run some 12. I don't really care. If you got 2, draft one more, run some 13. Like, at this point, you can't. Keith, I think I spotlighted him on Friday's show. Harold Perkins Jr. from Bowling Green against Texas A&M. Big game. Keith, big game. 145 yards, 8 receptions, but he's been targeted the last 2 weeks against 2 legitimate teams and defenses, and a step up in competition for Bowling Green. Harold Perkins Jr. has been targeted 13 times against Penn State, 14 times against Texas A&M.
Wow.
He had 137 against Penn State, 145 in the touchdown, and the touchdown catch and run versus Texas A&M. It's like they felt like they forgot that he was on the field. He slipped out on like a corner route, was open, but it was what he did after the catch, the explosiveness to change the direction skills. I think it was the safety that he beat. He put the safety in the blender with, stringing together, multiple cuts to make him just do a full 180 and ran right by him for the score. He's blocking well. He's more using that zone movement blocking on the perimeter. Like, he just looks like a guy that I got a feeling, Keith, that he keeps this up and he does declare, which, I mean, the way he's having the season he's having, I don't know why you wouldn't declare. I'm leaving. We just talked about this with Landon Jackson yesterday, Keith. If the stock is hot, leave. Like, I'm not coming back for another year. I'm going to the league, baby. I'm not waiting. When I look at Harold Perkins Jr., Keith, I truly believe that this is a young man, along with Tyler Warren. Like, those guys can push for that first round consideration. But your boy at LSU, Mason Taylor, he is coming off a good game. Brant Keith over at Utah is showing up. You know what I mean? Colston Loveland was out with the shoulder injury, so he couldn't add too much more to his season. But then you look at Oronde Gadsden over at Syracuse, to me, he looks like Darren Waller. You know what I mean? He looks like the second coming of Darren Waller. But also at North Carolina, Bryson Nesbitt. Like, he doesn't even have a true, like, consistent quarterback play. This tight end group has size, athleticism, pass catching ability. Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, teams like NFL, if you are a team that needs a tight end, like, you got to go into this draft. Like, listen, that Birdman meme, rubbing your hands together. There's no way these GMs are not looking at this tight end group. And don't get me wrong, like because some of these guys are hampered and held back by quarterback play. Our guy, Oscar Delp. I'm not quarterback. Sorry. Carson Beck truthers. I'm not taking a shot at Beck. That was not even. You got to correct that real quick. No, it's not Beck. It's the Mike Bobo, the offensive coordinator. But there are guys that aren't producing because of their situation, but we know they're talented. We know they have the skill set, right? So Oscar Delp is one of them. So, man, this tight end group to me is probably one of the deeper and more talented to positions in this draft class.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. My biggest takeaway, DP, is that we don't know, right? Like in what I'm about to say is that I think this may be the biggest if you talk about starting the draft, right, and who were projected first rounders and ending like when we actually get to the draft. I think this is going to be the biggest turnover, right? Where like there are going to be so many other names slotted in positions because we talked about this, right? Just from a production standpoint, there's so many guys that we thought were going to perform at a certain level, or through summer scouting, we're like, hey, these are guys that are good players. And I almost felt like that, obviously, right, because of my region. I watched so many of these SEC players. And I had a lot of fringe first round grades on, right? And the grade could have went either way. They could have been like, okay, they're first rounders, or I kind of see these guys more second round players. And when you look at the production part of it, right, we talked about it with Landon Jackson, we talk about it with James Pierce, talk about it with Deion Walker. Like there's a bevy of players that we can discuss as far Michael Williams, right? And I think he will be slated for just off of pure athletic ability and his traits and everything. But as far as the production and coming out the gate being absolutely dominant, I think that there can be a lot of turnover. And we just talked about the wide receiver rankings, right? If those guys aren't producing, then who gets pushed up, right? And if you look at the wide receiver core, it's like, okay, they have guys that's producing, but it was guys that's off the radar, right? Like not many people. Nobody was talking about Ty Felton, right? And what he can potentially be as a wide receiver, but also, I went to the obviously the Utah-Oklahoma State game, DP, and that was the first time Dorian Singer emerged, right? And then you was talking about Brent Keith, right? And he emerged in that game. And then I got an opportunity to check out Lander Barton. The guy is every bit of 6'4", 240. He looks like the real deal. I'm like, this is Brian Urlacher again, right? So it's one of those things, DP, where I'm like, you know what? 4 weeks in, I think there's so much. Obviously, there's a lot of football to be played, and this is going to reshuffle the deck. And even you talk about we did find, I was not saying, and I'm not saying us on Locked On, right? Because everybody's talking about this guy. But you found a small school guy in Siobhan Revel, right, at Eastern Carolina. And then unfortunately he tore his ACL, right? So that was a potential first round guy that everybody was talking about. And you talk about the cornerback class, like who are the top 5 corners, right? At this point, like that's totally in the air. I think if you ask 5 people, you're gonna get 5 different answers, and then some people might not have 5 for you at this moment. So I think that's going to continue to flush itself out also.
That was where I was going to go to next, Keith. Is like my defensive takeaway was the cornerback class. It is a lot of smoke right now, a lot of dust that's not been settled because we don't know outside of what the top 3. That is, Will Johnson, Travis Hunter, Benjamin Morrison. Yeah. Who's next? And Siobhan Revel was supposed to be.
The thing is, DP, they're making it easier for Travis Hunter, right? Because it's like the wide receiver class is like, it's okay. The cornerback class is okay. So he really has like when Deion says he could be the best wide receiver and the best corner, it's like the rest of the class is helping him out. Say like, hey, he got a shot.
It wasn't a lie. Like Coach Prime did not lie about that at all. But you're hoping that you're hoping and I think that's a big part of it too, Keith. The college football needs to fix this scheduling stuff. Like stop with these, because when you schedule so many cupcakes and you're up 45 at halftime, you're not playing, guys.
Your guys not playing. Yep.
Your guys not playing. Then we wait until week 6 and 7. Like, we finally in the conference play and we're facing legitimate teams. And now we think, okay, this guy's going to ball out. It was like, okay, this is your first tough, stiff competition, and you wet the bed or you don't play as well because it's like, man, this is my first time playing a real athlete that's on my caliber because we've been playing subpar teams this entire time. I really want them to fix that. But as we get deeper into the season, I expect the dust to settle to see who's CB4, 5, 6, 7, and everything like that, because that was it felt like the cornerback class was supposed to be one of the strengths of this draft class. And not saying that it's not, it's just the picture isn't clear. Like it's like looking through a lens, and it's like you kind of can make out what you're seeing, but it's all blurry right now because you're too far away. Yeah, that's what it is right now. This cornerback class, the picture is blurry. We don't really know outside of the top 3, and then we don't know if one of those guys in the top 3 is going to flip positions come draft time. Then it's the big 2. That's Will Johnson and Benjamin Morrison. So it's I think about it, Keith. I really don't even know. Like Georgia always has a top corner that we're talking about. Even right now, there's not a Georgia cornerback that's name's been uttered, or DB outside of Malachi Starks, for good reason for him. But the rest of the guys is just like, it's still a little unsettled right now.
Yep, I agree with that 100% with DP. As we're talking about this, right, and the draft class gets shaken up, right, we also had a big blow to one of the guys that a lot of people had in the top 50, right? Mr. Harold Perkins, tore his ACL. We're just going to talk about that impact, right? How does it impact him? How does it impact the draft class? What does that do, right? And we're just going to have that conversation coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big-time return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can now check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page you placed your bets. Talking about bets, guys, whether it's Super Bowl bets right now, MVP betting odds, all of that can be found on FanDuel Sportsbook. So why not go ahead and get in on the action, right? But also with FanDuel Sportsbook, you will get started with $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Matter of fact, your first $5 bet. Let me repeat that. You will get started with $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's a deal you just don't want to pass up. So all you need to do is go to FanDuel.com and get in on the action. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. Keith, Harold Perkins tore his ACL, like you said, this past Saturday. We never want to hear this news, right? When Siobhan Revels, I think Jim Nagy put out the very cryptic tweet right before it went public that he got a text about, he didn't say who. And people were like, oh, man, what's going on? Yep. It was one of the top players and stuff like that. And then, ESPN and I think, 24/7 Sports and all those different outlets started tweeting out. It was Siobhan Revel. Same thing in this situation where when I saw the tweet, Keith, I was like, no, man. This, I did not, because I didn't catch the end of that game, the LSU game. So I didn't even know he got hurt in that game. And to see it as an ACL, Keith, the initial thoughts about how this injury impacts his draft stock. Is this a situation where, let's say you're in his camp, do you tell him return to college football for one more season, or do you tell him just rehab and get ready for the draft?
DP, I actually thought about this on the way home last night. What do you tell him, right? Because it's September and ACLs usually take somewhere between 6 and 9 months, right? And I'm of the notion, right, as somebody who's torn the ACL before, that it's better, right, with sports medicine and how, but I still think it's not a guarantee, right, that some things can go wrong. And obviously, because you look at some players, right, and they always say, if you tear one, you end up tearing two. You get what I'm saying? Or something else, or it's your ACL, then it turns into, Achilles or something like that. And I would want him, obviously, to come back 100% healthy. So we look at the calendar, DP. It's September 23rd, right? 6 months from now is about the combine, right? And so he's not going to be ready for the combine. Pro day, right? Do you want to go out there at 7 months and and what happens is, DP, it's such a mental toll, because I didn't see the play, right? But most of the times when you tear your ACL, right, and they talk about those non-contact injuries, it's probably a move that you made your entire life, right? And just to feel your knee go out, it mentally kind of puts you in a fog, right, to feel confident. You have to build confidence to be able to plant on your knee and that everything is okay again. So DP, to be honest with you, I don't at this very moment, I don't have a for sure answer, because let's transition from the ACL, right, to what was happening previous ACL was that Harold Perkins transitioned from edge rusher to stack linebacker, right? And that was a process and development for him as far as being able to understand how to play linebacker. So do you come back to rehab from an ACL to learn how to play stack backer again? Do you move back to edge rusher to try to reboost your draft stock? Do you just try to go to the NFL and say, hey, and people know what your injury is and you're just on a good timetable? Like, what are you potentially coming back for? That's the other part of it, right? Are you coming back to show people that you develop at playing linebacker? Or are you going to develop at playing linebacker? Like, what if an NFL team drafts you and they say, hey, you know what? We're going to put you in your best position and put you at edge rusher. So it's a very difficult, like, especially for him. Because, at one point he was slated as a top 10 pick, right? And you're talking about making $25 million to now, where do we stand with things? And almost the conversation was about that even before the ACL, right? Just because of his position move.
No, I think that's a lot of great points. I think for me, Keith, I probably would tell him to try and return. And the reason why I would say that is just like the timetable you just put out, right? You're not gonna be able to test at the combine. You're not gonna be able to test at your pro day. Like teams, scouts and teams already were kind of wondering, okay, what position are you going to play early in the defense, right? Not so much on third downs. We know what we're going to do with you on third downs. We can walk you down, stand you up as an edge rusher and let you get after it. But first and second down, right? As you're developing as an off-ball backer, and then on this injury basically rips away the rest of the season from you from being able to get those live in-game reps to improve your instincts, football IQ, timing, reading blocking concepts, all the different things like that like, as when he's playing fast, he's a heat-seeking missile. You know what I mean? He's an explosive player. So it's like I would probably, and not just for that reason, but okay, let's remove some of the doubt in terms of, okay, well, I already had questions about you positionally, but now you're coming off, now you have an ACL. I don't know how early I'm gonna draft you. Maybe we draft you third round instead of, because even with the questions, Keith, there was still a lot of first round buzz at the back end of the first round for Harold Perkins.
Back end of the first. Yep.
So I would probably tell him to go back, and then you get a year removed, because what they always say, Keith, about the ACL, guys return the form a year removed from surgery. So it's like, okay, you got hurt now, you play next year at college football 2025, you get into the draft and you're healthy. You're a year and a half removed from the injury completely. Right.
No, and that's a good plan, right? And I think, and that's the problem, is that there are good options, but then once you even put the options out there, there's a counter argument to it, right? Like, it's like, okay, well, what do I come back for? And then what do I play for? And then do I re-risk injury again? And then what position am I playing? And then, it's so many things. And I think that even, like you said, right, him trying to come back, is that we also know the other part was, I think Harold Perkins' size, right, was going to come into factor, right? Like, how big is he? Is he 225? Is he 212, right? Like that was going to be a conversation. And the thing is that coming off an ACL injury, is that you're not going to be able to optimize that part neither, because you still have to work out. Like, well, you can't work out to be able to build your body to be a good 232, right? Or a good 230 pounds or something like that, or something of that nature, right? And I think that's going to hinder that part too, right? Like, that is like, okay, cool, I'm not going to do any workouts come my pro day, but I'm going to get on a scale where it's like, are you sure you're going to be able to optimize your body to peak performance if you wasn't able to, be able to work out and, do the squats and the lower body lifts and be able to do the running that you need to, because you actually spent this time rehabbing? I think the entire thing, DP, is going to be an interesting conversation. It's going to be very interesting to see what he does. If I'm him, I don't even rush to a decision. I don't make a decision until I have to, just because there's so much going on. All I can say is, at this point, focus on getting healthy and focus on doing what you have to do. But DP, that wraps up another episode, man, of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to end this podcast off by saying, shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. Every listen is greatly appreciated. I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my guy, my co-host, Mr. Damian Parson. And you can find him on X at DP_NFL. Like we like to say, man, y'all come talk to us, because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube. Wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. On tomorrow's episode, we got Prospect Spotlight, Dames, dudes from week 4. Who's getting in the club? Who's got to go back to their dorm and try again the next week? Come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.